Today I'm going to talk about masking fluids. So if you are a watercolor artist, you might want to add masking fluid or liquid frisket, which is what this version is called, to your set of supplies. Because when you are a watercolor artist, you want to be able to reserve your whites because you don't use white paint in watercolor. And masking fluid allows you to protect white or areas of your paper that you want to save as white without having to paint around it. So I'll show you how to use it. So this is the little jar of Grumbacher Misket liquid frisket. It is tinted, which is really nice, and the tinting has separated, but you just give it a little shake and that blends in. So I like this brand because I haven't had issues with the lid gluing shut, which I have had that issue with other brands, and it removes nice and easily from the paper, so it doesn't rip, or I haven't had the issue with it ripping. So before we get into actually using it, let's talk about how you apply it. When I do my little painting demo today, I will be using my kind of typical Princeton Heritage round brushes. Do not use your good brushes to apply the frisket. You want to make sure that whatever you are using is either a really old brush that you can throw away because it will destroy them, or you can try and wash your brushes really quickly because the kind of rubberiness of the liquid frisket or the masking fluid will get onto the bristles. So don't use anything that you are worried about. Now, I bought a set of these silicone tipped brushes. They're just rubbery in different shapes, and they are amazing to use with masking fluid. So these are super cheap that I bought off Amazon. The ferrules were super loose, so I ended up gluing them on, and you can see I let them dry on paper, and I took up some of the paper, but that doesn't affect how they actually work, and they were, like I said, dirt cheap. And if you buy a set like this, they come with different shapes. I use a few different ones. Like this one is nice because it just comes to a point, so you can do little dots, like if you want to do a starry sky. There's some that are kind of rounded, so you can apply like kind of a little stampy sort of a thing. It just depends what you want. Today, let's see, I think we will use this one. So it is an angle, so you can get a nice straight line, but you can also do little dots, or you could do a wide area as well. Okay, so let's get into this. So I am going to do a little painting of a water scene or like a wave, because waves will have white spots that you'll want to keep. So first, I just give this a shake. You can take a minute. You don't want to shake it too vigorously because you can get a lot of bubbles. It's not the end of the world to have some bubbles, but it just is easier. So there, it's all properly blended. So now open it up. Now it is, I believe, latex material, so it can be kind of smelly, but it works really nicely. So I've put some on, just dipped my silicone brush into this, and you don't want too much. Like you can see, let's see if it's, I don't know if it's in focus. You can see there's kind of like pools of it. You don't really want that, especially if you're doing a small area, so I just kind of dab it off. Okay. So now I just apply it kind of like you would apply paint to areas that I want to keep white. So, and you can just keep going back in and reapplying and just kind of dab it off. So with a wave, you're getting foaminess, so you don't have to be too perfect. A bit at the top there. So what's nice with this particular shape that I chose today is I can do tiny little dots, do wider areas, because down here would definitely be the widest area of foam. And then I want to have other spots that have some sea foam that are outside of the actual wave itself. Now, you don't want to apply it too thickly because this needs to be completely dry before you move on. And if it's really thick, it can take a long time to dry, and you can also have an issue where you think it's dry, but the center is actually still wet. And then when you go to paint, it just kind of smears and then ruins your brushes. Okay, now I'm just going to add a spot where maybe there's too much. So I don't know if you can quite see this, but I've applied kind of maybe a thick blobby bit here. So just kind of spread it out because you don't want a thick blobby bit. Okay, so that's easy. And that's kind of it. I'm going to dab this off. So now at this point, let me focus. At this point, you have some frisket on it. So let me just grab a piece of paper towel. So with my paper towel, with the silicone brush, you can just wipe it off, and there you go. It is clean. And I promise you, if you did this with a paintbrush, you would never be able to get all of it out of the bristles. So like I said before, if you're using a paintbrush, make sure it's not one that you want to keep or one that you want to use again as a paintbrush. Like it's going to be your masking fluid brush from now on. Now, let this completely dry and we'll come back. Okay, I've let this dry completely, and you can kind of run your finger along where you've applied it, and depending if it's a little bit if it's very thin, you almost won't even feel it, but where it's, a tiny bit thicker, you'll feel kind of a rubbery feeling. You just want to make sure there's absolutely no flex in it because you don't want the outside layer to have dried, but the inside layer is still wet. Okay, mine is good. So let's get into it. So let's start with, I'll start with the sky. So I'm going to use a bit of ultramarine blue. Add some water. So that it's nice and diluted. You don't want the sky to be too much of the, taking the eye away too much from the wave. So I just kind of roughly put in a bit of a sky, a little bit darker at the top. And there you go. That's it for the sky, as quick as that. Now I'm going to go in and add some phthalo blue green shade for the ocean. So we'll start with the deeper part of the ocean back here. This is mostly going to be one flat color. We'll add a bit more because we want it to be darker because it's so deep back there. So just apply it along. And along the top edge of where this wave will be. Now we haven't started tackling any of the areas where the actual masking fluid is. Just add a bit more of the phthalo right, because we want the darkest way back there. At least the darkest part of this section. So I'm going to clean that out. Now I'm actually going to, because this is going to be quite wet, I don't want to kind of get have issues with the central part of the painting. I'm going to go with the bottom part of the ocean. So I'm going to take a fairly diluted amount of the phthalo blue. I'm going to start down here. And you can paint right over your masking fluid, which is really fantastic. It makes painting so much quicker. I didn't mention, but I'm using Arches cold press for this. Really like Arches. Has a nice texture, not just the right amount, not too much, but a little bit, and it just works really nicely. Now, a little bit close to the steep part of the ocean, but this edge here looks like it should be dry enough that it's not going to bleed together too much. I just don't want it to completely kind of burst its edges. Okay, so we've done kind of an initial layer of this foreground part of the water. And what I would like is, because this wave, you'll get kind of a darker part of the water kind of underneath where the wave crashes. So you just put some of that in underneath where you had put some of the, or where I put some of the masking fluid, because you'll get a bit of foam in these thinner parts. Now the darkest part really is just where the shadow is, and the deepest part of the water would be kind of right where it curls. So you want to make sure it's nice and dark. If you find it gets too, I guess, dramatic of an edge, take a wet brush or a brush with just a little bit less paint on it, kind of soften the edge. Now you want some depth and darkness along up here, but less down here because we're getting back into the thinner part of the water. Now you had, or I had applied masking fluid along here and here. So those are bits of sea foam, possibly even tinier little waves. So I'm just going to get a bit more paint, a bit of water. I want to make it a little bit darker underneath. That's probably a little too dark, so I'm going to clean my brush, add just a bit of paint and soften that. Nice thing about waves is they're not perfect, so your painting technique can be nice and loose. Just think, where would there be a tiny bit of a shadow underneath where the sea foam is blocking the light from coming through, and add a bit of paint. Of course, underneath where the wave crests would be a little bit dark, not as dark as kind of in these pockets here, but a little bit dark. And here, now that I have some of these other colors on, this is looking a bit flat. So I'm going to take just a light amount of the phthalo blue green and just add a little bit, just to give it a little more texture to the water, a bit of a shape. And along here, it looks a little splotchy. A little splotchiness is okay, but we want just a little bit of softening and just a little bit of varied color. Okay, now let's do the sand. That's the last layer that we'll do. And I'll use, let's see, I believe this is yellow ochre. Yellow ochre is a nice color for sand. You can use burnt sienna as well. Just gonna add a layer. I want to go right up to the edge of the water here. And then get a bit more of the yellow ochre. This time I'm going to apply it a little bit more darkly. I'm actually going to switch my brush to a slightly smaller brush. You don't necessarily have to, depending on what you have. And I'm just going to paint kind of the edge of where the water would be touching the sand, because it would be a little bit wet there. So it'd be darker, but there would also be a little bit of a shadow. Let's get it a little bit more thick or deep of a color. And just add it along here. So watercolor is all about adding layers so that you get more depth. Okay, that's nice along there. And then I'm just going to add a bit add a bit of water to my brush and get a bit more of the paint just so, or the yellow ochre, just so that it's not quite so flat looking. So now we had, you know, did about 3 layers of paint, all wet on wet. So you did a first layer, just get a light kind of even layer of yellow ochre, then we built up the color underneath there, the edge of the water, and then just a little bit more to add a little bit of depth throughout. And essentially that's it. Now you would let this dry completely because you do not want to remove your masking fluid until the watercolor and the paper is completely dry. So I'll come back in a few minutes. Okay, the watercolor is completely dry now, and you can tell by putting your hand on the paper, and you shouldn't feel anything that is cool. Okay, so to remove the masking fluid, I usually just use my finger for the most part, and you just kind of rub, and it starts healing off. And like I said earlier, I like this masking fluid because it doesn't tend to rip the paper. I've had issues in the past with some other brands that have peeled the paper just a little bit, and that is frustrating if you're working on something that is quite important, or you know, it has a lot of detail, it takes a lot of time. So that removed most of it. So I'm going to show you another trick. So you just take your regular old white vinyl eraser, and that can help with the you know, just adding a little bit more of friction to be able to remove the masking fluid. Again, tap that off, and there you go. You have a quick little painting. And I'll remove the washi tape. And that just took 3 colors, just to do a simple wave and just to simply show a simple demonstration of the masking fluid. And you can see everywhere that I had the masking fluid, it was just left completely white, and it just makes it so much easier to do a painting like this and do it quite quickly. And what's nice with masking fluid is you can do layers. So you can put some paint down, let that completely dry, put masking fluid on it, because if you want to reserve that specific color, you can do that. And you can do large spaces, little kind of erratic spaces like this, or shapes like this. Really, the sky's the limit on using masking fluid. Just remember, make sure everything is dry before you move on to the next step.